everything that's ever happened to us, we individuals, physically, chemically, emotionally, energetically, it's stored in our system, in the cells and the energy that surrounds the cells, that gives life to the cells, the consciousness that gives life, right? And the tip of the iceberg of what we think are our issues is conscious, right? The rest of that iceberg is unconscious. And by definition, we're not aware of it. And that place of awareness is incredibly quiet, peaceful, wise, problem-solving place.
Well, hello everyone and welcome back. How are you today? So we have another amazing episode ahead of us as part of our Conscious Accelerator Experience. And I'm here today with someone who I met probably, it must be about 6 months ago now. And we met through a mutual friend. And since that time, it's been quite an amazing experience in terms of really delving into the whole world of kinesiology. So I'm with Ian Haycroft, who's a kinesiologist and has a whole range of quite different eclectic experiences in business, not-for-profit, and healing, and is now at an interesting point in life where he's starting to see the interconnections between all of those different modalities. So welcome, Ian. How are you today? It's good to see you.
Thanks, Lawrence, and hi to everybody. Yeah, thank you.
So what's going on? We were just talking before about your life now living on the farm and some of your experience. It sounds like your day, when we think about equilibrium, your day has a whole range of different things in it, which is good because it gives you that variety. But where are you based now?
Yeah, no, variety is definitely the spice of life at the moment. I'm based in actually a little place called Old Benelbo, which is up in the hills. If you think Byron Bay and 2 hours inland to the west, it's just beautiful. Near the Yabra National Park, it's a beautiful Aussie bush area. And it's a piece of heaven for us. So my wife and I are here, and it's such a different experience, right? I mean, because in my life, I've lived and worked, we have lived and worked in cities, New York, Washington, Shanghai, Brisbane, all of these large cities. And there came a point where my wife, who was born in Western Massachusetts, country girl,
right,
where she said, enough already. I need some country.
Wow.
And she well and truly deserved it, me having dragged her around all those cities for so many years for work. So we moved to, and I'm, I don't ever see myself retiring, but I've retired from the kind of business world that I was in, and now I get to focus more on the healing work that is actually my love, really.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, when I, to give you a bit of a background on that. So, I went to Melbourne Uni, then education at La Trobe University, and had a short stint at teaching in the secondary schools. And then, like lots of Australians at that point, I went, I'm going to go see the world. And I had read Yogananda at that point in my life, and I won't give you the whole long story, but the short version was I was the footy loving country kid who was going to do great, and and my parents had great hope for me, and my goal was to play VFL, or what's now called AFL, and I didn't get drafted the year that I should have, and I wondered about that. And the end of that story is 20 years later, I found out I had been drafted, but my parents had told the teams don't go near him because I was under 18 at that point, and they had that right.
Okay. Wow.
So suddenly my dream didn't happen, and it was quite devastating in some ways. And I started reading things like Yogananda, and it really just changed my view, really. And so, like lots of Aussies, I went off to India and Nepal and off to find my guru, and lived in a Buddhist monastery in Nepal for a while and had lots of, in retrospect, beginnings of spiritual awakenings that would probably only mature much later. Yeah.
So interesting. But who, and I mean, what inspired you at that point in your life? Because you were living in a very different life, but to read Yogananda, like, where did that inspiration come from?
Well, because I was just a classic Aussie country kid, right, playing footy. But because things were not working the way I thought they were supposed to work, and then I had friends, I was in Friends of the Earth at that point, marching in the streets to.
Okay, so you had that activist.
That activist streak, and someone put me onto Yogananda, and I read it, and it was just one of those, those moments, Ram Das, Yogananda, Be Here Now, and it really just opened my whole life to a whole different way of looking at things.
Okay.
And it was kind of my chance to escape. So hence I went to India to, find a guru and figure out what was really important in life. But that spiritual search didn't quite end the way I wanted either, because I got amoebic dysentery and got so sick I had to leave. So,
really?
So much for the grand experience. And I flew to London to go to an infectious diseases hospital where I stayed for 3 weeks.
Oh, really? Oh, golly. So that,
the best laid plans, right?
Yeah.
To become this beautifully enlightened guru, but that didn't happen. And
how long were you in India?
I was in India for about 4 months only.
Okay.
And then,
it didn't quite lead, but it's interesting. But that then took you to London.
And to London, and then I'd read another book about different communities across England and then America, and I thought, well, I'll just visit communities. That'll be a good thing to do, because I was going to take a 1 year break. Yeah. And so I lived in a community in Wales, which was in a slate quarry. It grew its own fish and all.
A real.
Yeah, and then I grabbed a Freddie Laker flight back in those days when that was the $90 flight to New York City, and I hitchhiked across America, visiting different spiritual communities, or not even spiritual, just communities.
Wow.
And my plan was just to head on home, I'd go to these communities and head on back to Australia. But then, of course, I met my now wife. So my 1 year trip out of Australia turned into 21 years.
Okay.
Stayed in America for 20 years, married in America, our children.
Okay.
Had 6 kids, and our
children
born and raised, at least the earlier part of their lives in the States. And I worked mostly in the not-for-profit world.
Okay.
I did a lot of traveling in different parts of the world.
Okay. And where in America were you based at that point?
LA, New York, Washington. We moved.
Okay. So the big cities you did. Okay. So that was your American dream or American chapter. Okay.
Yeah. And then from there to so part of that, I was in the not-for-profit world, but as we continued to have more and more children, of course, not-for-profit doesn't pay a lot, and so I worked for a for-profit company. And again, the short version is I was basically doing due diligence around the world, because I traveled a lot, of different investments overseas that could work. And one of them was a vegetable export company in China, and the board liked it. And they said, well, who will get to run this? And they looked at me because I knew all about it. And I went, okay. So my wife and I and 6 children go. You can imagine how exciting that was, taking 6 blonde-haired, blue-eyed children to
China.
To China in 1996.
Wow.
And spent 3 years.
That was a year I went to China as well. Yeah, it's funny. In 1996, that was I've been to China twice. That was the first trip to Beijing. Wow.
and a very different China than today. And
very different,
And it was a joint venture between a US corporation and a Chinese government corporation, and it was a 50-50 joint venture. And those don't happen anymore because they're a ticket to disaster. And so let's just say it was a challenging 3 years.
I can imagine. Character building, I think they call this. Huge spiritual growth.
That's the word. That's the word. But it is actually the place I had what I would call my most life-changing
experience.
What I call a spiritual experience. I don't know if you'll hear about it now, we can talk about another time. But
yeah, no, it'll be good. I mean, a spiritual experience, because those types of things, I think you learn, don't you? It's during those, I say there's a lot to people, but it's during those adverse periods of our life that you do experience the greatest growth. And it's just, you don't realize it at the time because it feels miserable. So
no, absolutely. And just quickly, I mean, the experience was I was there, and exactly as you say, suffering. I was the meat in the sandwich, right, between the US part of the board and China part of the board, and I was general manager and board member of the board. And the thing was a disaster, just constantly, and very, very challenging. And so after a year, Kim and the kids moved to New Zealand because living in China was just, the smog was incredible, and we were worried about the kids. And I stayed by myself.
Oh my God!
In China, right? So
wow, so a family of 7, and then suddenly you're on your own.
Yeah, and FIFO, 6 weeks on, 1 week off, right? From New Zealand to China, that was exciting. Way to destroy a marriage, actually. Anyway, but that's another story. But I was struggling, and I used to each evening go and meditate or pray by a fish farm in outside of Shanghai, and I was scraping the bottom on all kinds of levels, emotionally and otherwise. And those days, probably my view has changed a bit. In those days, I would pray to God, and I have a master's in theology, among other things, and
I've always
been interested in those.
Yes.
But I guess I had a showdown with God, and I won't use the language I used in my prayer. But
imagine.
Let's just say I said things I would never imagine saying to God, and I'm not an angry person by nature, but I was incredibly angry, frustrated, and about 30 minutes into me just ranting at this God who I was then going to reject and tell to bugger off, basically. I just had this experience of being overwhelmed with being loved. And I have to be careful when I talk about it because I'll go to tears pretty quickly. And it changed my life in the sense that I was just overwhelmed with how much I am loved, and therefore we all are loved. And it just changed the way I saw myself, the way I saw other people, the way I saw what life was really about, really. And that's fashioned so much of what I do, including my healing work now.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. Just picking up on that. So, and it is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful story. I've heard it before, and that, that connection that you had to that, let's call it a higher source, is amazing. Was the changes instant, or did it take a while for you to adjust? So you moved from a situation, let's say, anger, to a situation of feeling loved, feeling supported, feeling part of something bigger, all of those, good things. But how was it for you? Was it literally like a night and day? 1 minute hugely angry, next minute you felt encompassed in love, and then things started to change?
No, I think in some way, I guess it was instant in the sense of 45 years getting to that point. And but at the moment, it was instantaneous. The experience was instantaneous. But how to integrate that into my everyday life was not instantaneous, because it was like, okay, how do I do business from this point of view? How do I deal with
you were still the meat in the sandwich. Like, the issues were still there. They hadn't been solved. So what happened though next, and what did you decide to do? So with that change in feeling, you still had the same problems, and if we think about, we've all got problems, and sometimes we focus very much on trying to solve the problems, and the problems just seem to get bigger and bigger. Like the black cloud gets darker and darker, and we can't see the sun, and and it becomes miserable. And a lot of people are in that situation. But what you're saying is you had this massive dark cloud, and just to really highlight, your whole family had let's use the word deserted you, but they'd left, they'd left, and they'd left you behind, and you were on your own in China with the smog in a environment that wasn't exactly supportive of your well-being. So you were as low as you could get really at that point, and you got out of that, and you came through it, and you just finish that story now, because the issues were still there. So you had that moment of change, and then what did you do? How did you go about changing your situation, getting out of that mess, and lead into the present day?
I mean, it's such an important point, right? I mean, because, and as you can see by the background, I'm part of this group now called Conscious Accelerator, right? And it's about, if you change your view, then your capacity to deal with those problems, the problems have a completely different context, a completely different impact. So it's actually to change your view and your capacity to deal with the problems, you've actually got to change the viewer, right? And in this case, lucky is probably not the word, but I got kind of whacked with this change of view, whether I wanted it or not. Well, I did want it. I just didn't quite expect it, right? Yeah. And so I had a totally different change of viewpoint and perspective. And really what it did is made me realize very clearly, this is not what I'm meant to do. I'm actually not meant to be a general manager of a vegetable export company. However much I enjoy the income, that's not what I'm meant to do. And so I really made the decision quite quickly to go, okay, I need to move on. So that took a year, because I didn't want to just abandon ship, so I had to put other people in place, all those things. But then I moved on, and then my wife and I had to decide, okay, do we come to Australia, which is my home country, or do we go back to the States? And I love the States, right? And I think in retrospect, luckily, we decided to come back to Australia.
Yeah.
So the how did I deal with things? Well, my whole view of what reality is and what's important changed. And I think that's a critical thing for all of us. If you talk about equilibrium, right? It's actually about changing the view and the viewer. Nobody, the external world doesn't change the view.
I love that.
Internal process, right? And if you can change the internal process, then what look like problems suddenly, well, not even necessarily suddenly, but they will become opportunities.
Yes,
you don't need to hide from them.
No.
Even the difficult ones, right? So, you can imagine it was not an easy decision to go, okay, I'm going to leave a pretty well-paid job in China to come back to Australia with 6 small children and do what? Right?
Exactly.
Because I knew the corporate world was no longer for me. And so I had to figure out, okay, at 45 with 6 children, what I'm going to do when I grow up.
Wow, so just a little bit of stress there. That's a very stressful experience. That's why people stay in positions that do not necessarily support them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just underline that point you said around, I'm reminded of the Wayne Dyer quote, which is very famous about when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And just practically, I always, because we both wear glasses, but sometimes it's useful to almost take off the glasses and put another pair on, because that is symbolic to say, through this pair everything looks dark, but through this other pair everything, it's the same thing. You look at exactly the same thing, but you look at it through different spectacles, different glasses, and you see different things. And like you said, you see the opportunity within the within the black cloud. You see the ray of light, you find a path forward. So what happened next then? I mean, it's a fascinating story. So you came back to Australia with a whole family of children that were looking, that needed to be fed, clothed, all of those things. And you stayed in China for a year, but you made that decision that it wasn't for you. So you were basically, I suppose, psychologically moving towards your exit. I think once you make that decision, it's like, okay, it's not for me, I've got to go. In many ways, that releases a lot of emotional energy. But what happened? So when you got back to, when you came to Australia as a family, where did you live? What did you do? How did you make ends meet?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say too, right, it was never just me, it was my wife and I, right? Because she's, through all of that, she also had to deal with all of these things. Right? She was the one taking really the major responsibility for the kids, and so it's never it was not a one man.
No, it's true. Well, was you were in China on your own, you know, feeling like the meat in the sandwich. She was alone with 6 children in New Zealand. So, you know,
absolutely.
Anyone with 2 children knows how stressful that can be if you're on your own.
Yeah, and you know, and she decided to come to Australia, and America's her home, right? And that comes with a lot of cost. And, you know, separation from her family, and you know, with 6 small children, it's not like you can just hop on a plane several times a year. And you know, it's not like we're rolling in cash. So, but when we did come back, we thanks to my brother, who was a very generous guy, he said, "Well, come work with me." He had a labour hire agency, and so and he helped us find a place to rent.
Great.
And then I started working with him in work again that wasn't really mine, but it was a really generous kind of landing spot for me. And then we bought a place on the Sunshine Coast near Noosa.
Nice,
beautiful part of the world. And we were able to get 5 acres of land. So we had a humble house, but the kids could play. You know, it's Queensland, and it's just beautiful sunny weather. And so, luckily, the kids really had their schooling years and their early formative years. So I think our oldest was 11 at that point, and our youngest was 3.
Okay.
And so they got to grow up on the Sunshine Coast, which is heaven. Really.
Gorgeous, gorgeous place to grow up.
And I had some room, again, thanks to my brother's generosity, to start to think about, okay, gently exiting from that work to what I wanted, and I really didn't know. But then I just coincidentally. I went to a presentation about kinesiology one evening because it just seemed to interest me. And then when I went to the presentation, it didn't just interest me, it just everything lit up. It's like, well, I could do this, because I've always wanted to help people, right? And so I took up the kinesiology, studied it, and then opened a clinic in Noosa to do kinesiology, which is, again, wonderful. I love doing it, but not so easy to support 6 kids on, because you just get paid for the people who come to the clinic, and there's only so many you can do falling over and losing. So then I did some balancing work where I got a part-time job in the Noosa Council and continued to do the kinesiology. And so really, because my focus was really, okay, how do I support a family but also try to do that which I love.
It's very modern. That's very modern now. The portfolio career, you're ahead of your time.
That's right. And so the kids grew and they left home as they do. And then our baby Meg, she was 16, wanted to go to Brisbane to a special school for creatives, Kwaki.
Okay.
And so we moved to Brisbane because a friend of mine who was actually a former client, become friend, was starting a business in property development, venture capital. And he said, come help me. And I said, I'm not going to do corporate. And he goes, no, we're going to do this differently. And so I joined with him and 4 others, and we together built this company up. And I actually did the kinesiology with staff. We started with 5, we got up to 25 staff, and I would actually continue to do the kinesiology
and master your craft. That's amazing. Let's change gear a little bit now and dig deeper into the kinesiology. So it's very interesting. I share my own experience. I first came across kinesiology about 25 years ago with a friend of mine was training, and she did a session on me, and if I'm honest, I didn't really get it at that point. I wasn't ready for it. And then of course I was connected to you, and we've done a number of sessions now. We've done it virtually, and now I'm at a different point in my life, so I get it at a much deeper level, and I can see the value. But maybe for our audience who may not be as familiar with kinesiology, I'd love you to just explain what it is and what it does, and why somebody could benefit from using kinesiology as part of their well-being toolkit.
Yeah, look, I think there's lots of versions of kinesiology, right? And but I think the fundamental thing that all the different kinds of kinesiology systems have is that it uses a muscle test to as the diagnostic tool. And I think lots of people these days have seen those muscle tests. You can push on the arm and get a strong or weak response. Lots of chiropractors use it, osteopaths, others, naturopaths. So your mind-body system will respond through the muscle system to something that is strong or something that is weak, something that is true or not true, for the body, for the mind-body. And that can be on a physical level, a chemical level, an emotional level, or an energetic level. And so, you know, people would come to the clinic with all kinds of issues: sore legs, sore arms, sore marriages, or, you know, you name it. And often usually having gone to many other places to deal with those ailments, right? Be it, again, physical or chemical or emotional or energetic. And so the system of kinesiology I use, which is similar to many others, you know, and I've just adjusted and built on it over the years, just really uses the muscle test to ask the mind-body system what's going on in this area. And essentially and this is, I think, the critical point, is that everything that's ever happened to us, we individuals, physically, chemically, emotionally, energetically, it's stored in our system, in the cells and the energy that surrounds the cells, that gives life to the cells, the consciousness that gives life, right? And the tip of the iceberg of what we think are our issues is conscious, right? The rest of that iceberg is unconscious. And by definition, we're not aware of it. And most people, when they get a problem or an issue, think, oh, I think it's this, or I think it's that, or I don't know what it is. And so often that which has occurred prior to that time, which is stored unconsciously, is really the source of the issue, right? And for most of us, you know, that's an incredible, you know, if you think about all of the physical, chemical, emotional, energetic stuff that we encounter in our life, that's an incredible amount of data, right? So thank goodness it's filed unconsciously, because if we were conscious 24/7 of all that information, we'd be nuts. It's too much information, right? So it's a fantastic system, and mostly that stuff's filed just fine. But all of us, I think, have experiences where certain elements of our life could have been filed better, or there's what I'd call an emotional attachment that gets in the way of our optimum functioning, right? And so often our reactions, how we experience life, how we experience others, is actually influenced profoundly by the unconscious. And not dealing with the unconscious is like, you know, it's like going into a business and going, yeah, I don't need spreadsheets or a budget. Like you need to understand that, right? And a lot of people have a fear like, oh, I don't want to go there, right? But I always say to people, it's your best friend, but we just need to ask it. So the muscle test is a way, because you can't do it consciously. A muscle test gives us a tool to ask the system what it's okay with and what it's not okay with. The essence of it, really.
Yes.
And what I've discovered over the time is, because not everybody can have a kinesiologist in their company, for example, or in their family, whatever. And not everybody has access to a kinesiologist or wants to muscle test. So though I think it's a fantastic way of accessing the unconscious, the process of discovering what I would call the wisdom within can be done without a muscle test. So I think muscle testing is fantastic. It's, I think, a short route, and it gets to some core issues. And I've worked now, you know, over these years in Australia, I've worked with CEOs and COOs and, you know, business people and, you know, parents and children, or, you know, all of those. So I would love to see a kinesiologist, for example, in every government organization and every business, because I think it's a very, if well done, incredible opener of doors, right? But I think we can also reach that place that muscle testing goes by learning to be quiet, right? Getting to the, you know, and your equilibrium, right, is so often there is so much noise in people's lives in their mind, right? And clearly I'm not the first one to say this. I think Eckhart Tolle and then a few hundred other historical gurus and teachers have said, right, you know, we are not our mind. we are not our body. We are not our emotions. So if we're not our mind, we're not our emotions, we're not our body, who are we?
Who are we? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the I in I am is who we are. I am aware of what's going on in the mind, what's going on emotionally, what's going on in my body. But I actually am not those. So though I think a muscle test is a wonderful way to access the unconscious, if we can begin to recognize that in fact, I am aware of all of that stuff and I'm not it, right? Then I can find a quiet enough place inside. And what happens in that quiet place is if you put, it's kind of like put an issue on it. So rather than having a kinesiologist on tap, although you can always use someone like me, is to ask, what's that? Why did I get angry at that situation? If there's a quiet place, and there is a quiet place within all of us, which is the I, if we ask and just place it there for consideration, amazing insights come. And they usually are a reflection of some experience of our unconscious. So, I mean, an example, in my life, right? I was raised by a wonderful mum and dad in the country. My mum was a school librarian. My dad was a morning radio announcer, right? And a comedian by past profession. And they were, incredibly loving. But my dad, he was raised, he was a 13-year-old boy during the Depression, right? And couldn't go to school, they couldn't afford to go to school. He had to go out and ride bikes and be a messenger boy for threepence a week. And we used to hear this story, right? And it was amazing, right? But because of that, he would, in my childhood, I would hear these words so often: money doesn't grow on trees. You've got to work hard to make a living. Right? I'd ask Dad, can I borrow the car? What, you think money grows on trees? Right? Stuff like that. And so part of my unconscious landscape was wealth doesn't come easily. You've got to work hard, right? So for more than 20, 30 years of my career, I never took a holiday. Right? Now, consciously, I would go, yeah, it's very important for equilibrium, balance, take breaks, all those things, right? I couldn't, right? Why? Because my unconscious landscape had a very strong message. If you stop working, money will stop. And that's an example of an unconscious driver that I was completely unaware of until I actually saw a kinesiologist. Right?
And the kinesiology brought awareness to that blocker. Okay,
Yeah.
and then you were able to deal with that. With that.
And these days I kind of call them ghosts in the machine, right?
I like that.
And we all have them, right? And we ignore that at our peril, in the sense that, my goal in life is to be as conscious as I possibly can be about all the decisions I make, how I treat people, all of those things, right? So to ignore the unconscious is, a bit silly in that.
Yes.
So I actually want to go, so we just got to dance with the ghosts, right? It's not scary. Now, some of our experiences that we filed away can be very painful ones, right? But better to allow them to come up and out than for them to push me around in my life.
Yeah, I agree. It's like your core belief system, isn't it? It's interesting, like that example that you shared. You grow up and those messages are almost programmed into your mind. Money doesn't grow into trees, and of course it's going to color. And it's only because you had this point in time where you challenged that belief and you had the opportunity to question, is that actually true or is it not true? And I think that process is quite uncomfortable for people to go through, because in some ways those beliefs give us comfort. It helps us say, this is right and this is wrong, and there can be all kinds of problems with that. But if suddenly you're almost confronted to say, actually, money, you don't have to work hard to get money. It's complete opposite. And then a whole load of emotions will come through, feeling like I've spent 30 years of my life following the wrong path, and I've wasted all this energy and all of those things. So I think it feels easy, and I completely agree. And I love this, the wisdom within. And the more we're tapped into that, this week it's all about awareness and bringing awareness to the unconscious. rather than being afraid of it, it's embracing it, because that will guide us, that will set us free. Certainly in my own experience, you know, we don't even know, because it's so much a part of us, we just don't know how much it actually drives our behavior. And it's only when you do have, you know, the gift of a tool like kinesiology, that you can suddenly tap into that and then go on that path of reframing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, kinesiology is just a tool, but what I would say, discovering that wisdom within. And there's lots of tools. It's not the only tool, right?
No.
I happen to think it's a wonderful opener, and it can help with some key issues. But once the process started and people have discovered, so, you know, I had the experience in China, which made me realize I am completely loved. I am completely safe. There's nothing to fear. So not going to the unconscious, what's there to fear? It's just stuff, right? Because I am not my mind. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my body. I am the one who's aware of that. And that place of awareness is incredibly quiet, peaceful, wise, problem-solving place. And then what comes up, right?
Yes.
And out, actually, right? So again, lots of methods to that. Kinesiology, I think, is a wonderful way, but it's not the only way, right? So
It's not the. So I suppose the key point is recognizing that you have this unconscious world, this inner world, and use tools to be able to tap into that, so that you can set yourself free. Because some of these beliefs can really hold us back and force us into feeling, as you felt when you're in China, you know, angry and you know, life is unfair and all of those things, and stuck. And those feelings are not, you know, are not particularly conducive to finding equilibrium.
no, and I think so many people, you know, parents and kids, and particularly in this era of social media and business people, right? They're tortured by their mind, right? But, you know, some estimates we have 60,000 thoughts a day, you know. And, you know, most people are stuck in those thoughts, right? And, well, that, you know, that's a formula for craziness, right? Because there's very difficult to get a perspective, right? And it's the realm of problems. So we actually need to move aside from and realize I am not those. And in fact,
I love that.
and use techniques to cut down the number of thoughts, because most of them are just like Pepsi commercials. Right?
Absolutely. And they just take your energy. Yeah, absolutely.
Why would I take that seriously, right? You know, I reckon there's about 98% of thoughts I just have and don't want to take seriously because they're just weird, strange. What? Really? Right. So I think from that quieter place within, the I am, then we can start to actually become the master of our thoughts. And because thoughts are not evil, right? They're thoughts, but so many of us are so overwhelmed by the noise of our emotions, the noise of our thoughts. Right?
There's a lot.
To actually get a perspective, if we're going to change the future, which we need to do, we've got to change the reality within.
Absolutely, that's the starting point. That's the start. You've got to be grounded yourself and very aligned, and you know, it takes a while, but you have to start tapping into that inner wisdom. And I think what you said is so important, that, and just bring it back to your story in China, because a lot of people now will be feeling how you felt in China, stuck, not knowing which way to turn. You know, let's just say there's big dark clouds and they've forgotten that the sun exists. And I think what you're saying is, even if the cloud is dark, remember there is a sun there and it will shine through. You need to almost go within is the first place, rather than looking externally to think, what can I do? If you tap into that inner wisdom, it will lead you and guide you. And we are all safe, we're all loved, you know, and things will work through. Even though you don't know what the solution is right now, having the belief that there is a solution will bring you a huge source of comfort. And I think your life story, what you've shared with us, really shows that, you know, to us. I'm conscious of time, so I want to be respectful of your time, but maybe I'll ask you just a couple of last questions.
Sure, no, absolutely.
The first question, just to really draw it all together, because you've gone through and you've had these this collection of eclectic experiences that have guided you through life, not for profit, all the work you've done with healing, running your own business, setting up your business, moving, living in cities, living on fire. It's like such a rich life experience. 6 children. It's an incredible life. Thank you very much for sharing that story. But if you were to summarize, let's say your 5 key lessons from all of that, to guide other people, what would they be? Like, what are the 5 things that you've learned when you look back at your life and experience to this point?
Well, that's such an organized way to think.
It doesn't need to be 5. It could be 3. It could be 2. Yeah. What insights have come through?
I mean, I think for me, the most important insight is that I am. That I and all of us are awareness, and that we are actually connected to the consciousness that is the source of all awareness. So in fact, we're all connected. We are the same, right? And for me, that's, what is the purpose of life? I would say is to discover our divinity or our consciousness or our awakening or our whatever word you want to use, right?
I love this.
Is to discover that. And often people go, that's like an escape, but actually it is an escape from the craziness of the thoughts and the world, which is dominated by thoughts and ego. We actually do need to step aside and discover who we really are. And from that perspective, it's not a place of inaction. Then we actually can resolve some of the issues that we personally face, but also our world faces, right? Because I know when I tried to solve problems when I was stuck in the mind world, I was pretty hopeless. And I think lots and lots of business leaders, parents are stuck, right? But the essence is a change in perspective of understanding, okay, that's who I am. And that's an experience, right? So I in a sense, I got lucky. I got zapped with an experience, right? But that experience is, so close. It's just who we are. We don't have to find it. It's already who we are. And it's from that place that we can then approach life, the future, what look like problems from a different perspective. It's all about perspective, right? I mean, David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force, is someone I really love and love what he did and what he stood for. He would say everything is perspective. It's the perspective from which you view which changes the issue, not the other way around.
Yes.
It begins with consciousness and then to the world of matter and those things. So not that those things don't matter, right? Not that it isn't important to work in business and have family. Of course, those are all important, but it's the place from which we view, right? So in some ways, I don't think I've got 5. I think I've got 1.
That's right? A big one. I love that one. Yeah, it's. I mean, there's so many things built within that, and I'm also reminded of another quote. And I can't remember the exact words, but it's something like, "Your greatest gifts often come along disguised as your worst nightmares," or something like that. Where and again, this is to your point about perspective. We see things, and it feels like a nightmare, but in truth there's a real gift within that. So
and I think the other one, which is very much connected to that, right, as you were talking, it struck me that of course there's one more, right, which is we need each other. We humans, I really believe, no, I don't believe, it's my experience, that we're designed to need each other.
We are.
I don't get to know I am without the help of others other I ams
Yeah.
to go there, right? And so in some ways, people who are stuck in the world of thought and emotion and problems and issues, right? We actually are designed to go, I need some help here, right? And I mean, my kids are all grown now, and they'll often call Dad and say, Dad, I've got an issue. I'll go, cool, let's do that, right? But I'm always saying to them, and who have you got to help, right? And I'm saying, I heard this psych is really good. I've heard this person is, it's like, or friends, we need each other.
We definitely do.
We're
Yeah.
not in this alone. As one of my friends, we're not in this alone, and none of us get out alive, right?
Exactly. It's I mean, it's just it's in my framework connection. It's at the very heart of it. It's in the middle, because we are connected to each other, and we need each other, and we can connect, as you shared. There's having people that because a lot of people might say, "Who do I know? I don't know anyone." My sphere of connection is limited. But that's where the power of books and mentors come in. As you shared with your story, you didn't know Yogananda, but you were able to access his thoughts, his advice, his guidance, and that set the path for your journey, and it has brought you to that, to the present day. So it's a fascinating story. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and let me just acknowledge you, for everything you've done, to help me personally. It's really been a major support in terms of tapping into my own inner wisdom, which is a wonderful thing. And also, you can work with people now around the world virtually, and that for me originally or initially was like, how are you going to do the muscle testing, and we've got, like, in Singularity here at the summit, there's some great new technologies that like the Tesla suit and things like that, where and the time is coming where you'll have arms moving through the through the screens, but for now, how can people get in touch with you, work with you, book a session? Where's the best way to connect?
Well, a couple of ways, right? I mentioned the Conscious Accelerator team, right? There's 5 of us, and you're interviewing them, I know. So you can get in touch with me through the consciousaccelerator.com. And I mean, just the experience with those people is for me life affirming, life changing, right? Because we all come from such different backgrounds, but there's a common view that we need to discover and help others discover the I am, and that view from which we can build a future together. And I love working with those people. And it's the first time in my life where I've experienced being in a business where I love the people I'm working with.
That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah. So that's the first place. And then I also have a website called theclearmindway.com.
Clearmindway.com. Okay, so a couple of places.
Book sessions are directly on there as well. And you can muscle test virtually, because we're all just energy. Right? We're all just energy. So and I'm happy to talk with people, to get over it. I'm happy just to have a talk about it first if they want to go, oh, I don't know about this. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Ian. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And
thanks, Lawrence.
And we must definitely do a part 2, and probably a part 3, 4, 5, and 6, because I think we could discuss this topic for a long time. We're just scratching the surface. So thank you everyone for listening, and have a good day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.